things happening in Pascagoula. It was an October night, fishing on a Mississippi riverbank. Sky lit up, time stood still, my whole world changed against my will with that black water and a blue moon.
Alright, so I'm here, and with me in his house is Calvin Parker. How you doing, man?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm making it. So, for those of you that don't know Calvin Parker, he had an alien encounter. A UFO encounter was abducted by an alien. So we're gonna talk about that here in just a little bit. He also has some books he's gonna talk about, and a couple a song someone has written about him. We're gonna play that as well coming up. But first, just take me back. Take me back to when you were a kid. Did you ever believe in those things?
No, I never even knew what one was. The closest thing I knew when I was coming up in the they had the Apollo mission going to the moon.
Right.
And when it come back, I remember the biggest thing I remember is them quarantining everybody for 7 days away from their family and all. And that was the one thing that stuck in my mind. But I had no idea about UFOs and aliens until I got abducted.
Right.
So, to make a long story short, when I got abducted, that was the one thing I was worried about was catching a virus or giving one to somebody else, or maybe radiation or something. Of course, this was in 1973, and I was working in the oil field, and I was getting ready to get married because I was working 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. And I didn't want a job like that when I went to work in the oil field, so I called a friend of mine, Charles Hickson, up and asked him if he had a job. And of course, he was working here on the coast for F.B. Walker and Son Shipyard. He said, sure, come on up. And he said, I got a room I can rent you for $50 a week. I said, well, that's good. So I made the drive, and I came down on October the 10th, took my physical and all this, and went to work on October 11th at the shipyard. My first day at the shipyard. And as I tell everybody, on my first day going to that agent, I got another physical, I got abducted, and lost a job all in one day. So we went to work on October 11th at the shipyard, and I was working as a ship fitter. And when we got off work, Charlie suggested to me that we go fishing. I said, well, that's good, but I didn't bring no fishing equipment. He said, well, I got some you can use. Now, for a man from the South offering to let you use his fishing equipment, that's like him loaning his wife or something. So
yeah,
that's a pretty big honor. I said, well, okay. So we went by his house and picked it up. And he said, there's a place I go called the grain elevator where I usually fish. So we got in my car and rode to the grain elevator. And the bugs, what they call the no-sims, which you can't see them, but they got to have a mouth as big as a right hippopotamus or something, because they hurt when they bite.
Right.
They were so bad that we couldn't stay there. He said, well, there's another place right up the road. There's an old abandoned shipyard called the Saltpeter Shipyard. And I've always caught a few fish there. Let's go over there. So we decided to leave and go to the Saltpeter Shipyard. We got out, and the first thing I noticed was a no trespassing sign, because it was an abandoned shipyard, and there was debris everywhere. And I said, Charlie, why don't they ever clean this place up? He said, well, he explained when the water got up and got high, all the debris would come up into the shipyard. Then when it went out, it would just leave and deposit it there. So, that pretty well explained that. We went ahead and got our fishing equipment, walked to the pier, pulled an old log up on the pier and sat down at the log, and I was looking across the river on the other side where there's a no steel hull boat. And I was thinking to myself, now how does something made out of steel float? And that's always amazed me, how they build them out of steel and concrete and all, and they float. Well, that's when I noticed some blue lights flashing from behind us, reflecting across the water there, and I just figured it was a law down there to run us off. I told Charlie, I said, that's the law, they here to run us off, and you're going to get me out of jail because this was your ideal. Well, about that time we stood up and we turned around and looked, and we noticed there was something, and we couldn't quite make it out just yet, sitting behind us probably 100 yards, and there was blue hazy lights just revolving around it. And they were about the same color as the patrol cars in this area. Then all at one time, the lights got bright. It's just like a big spotlight come down on us. And when these lights got bright, it kind of blinded us for a second. But when it got to where we could see just a little bit, or where I could see, now I'm not speaking for Charlie, it was 3 creatures approaching us. Now, they was built real odd, you know, like a football player, as I described them, except they didn't have a neck or nothing. Their head just kind of sat on their shoulders, and they was gray in color, and their skin was wrinkled like an elephant.
So, I don't want to interrupt you, but did it look like, kind of like, you know, like TV shows will inherit and say this is what an alien looks like? Kind of like, you said they were green, but like the green creatures and stuff like that. Did they look like that with just gray? Or did it
No, they didn't look nothing like I've ever seen.
Okay.
When I got done with the book, I did some research, and it never interested me till last year when I was writing the book. So I was doing research on aliens to see if I could find some pictures that looked like them. Nothing even looked like these, and they moved like they was mechanical, like robotic, you know.
Okay.
So these creatures floated across the top of this grass and debris, and they was there in no time. And that's when they grabbed me. One of them grabbed me by my left arm, and 2 of them got a hold of Charlie, and I felt an injection in my arm. So we figured, and later on when we went to the hospital, they figured it was something to settle us down so we wouldn't be so scared of anything. And that kind of relaxed me. Well, this thing started carrying me toward the craft, floating now. He just floated across this marsh grass. And what was amazing to me, when he lifted me up by this one arm, it was no pain involved or nothing. Now, I didn't weigh but about probably 140 pounds in, and you'd figure it would break your arm, something just grab and pick you up. But it was just kind of levitated us along with them, floated us to the craft, and we got to the door where this bright light was coming from. And one of the first things I remember was looking in to see if I could see any light fixture or a spotlight or something like that. But it wasn't. The lights was illuminating out of the walls. It looked like it was coming out of the paint. Then they kind of dimmed as we went on inside the craft. Well, I made a left turn. Now, I don't know where Charlie was at this time. I didn't see him anymore till I got out. But this creature made a left turn with me. He went down just a little ways down the hall, and there was a door on the right, and he made a right turn and went into this door. And there was an examination table that I could see, and I don't know why I'm calling it an examination table. I guess because he laid us on it. But it was looked like glass. It was a beautiful looking table, and he laid me on this table at an angle. And then he just backed up out of the way, got in a corner, and just sat there. And that's when I figured he was robotic or mechanical or something, taking commands of somebody else. Well, out of the corner of my eye, which I couldn't move my body, but I could roll my head a little bit, roll my eyes, I noticed this, and I'm calling it a female, I don't understand why, female looking creature coming toward me. Now, she looked fairly normal to me. You know, if I'd met her on the street, I never would have known she was an alien or anything. She had eyes, nose, ear, mouth. The only difference I could see, and the reason I noticed this, she got her hands and she grabbed me by the cheek and kind of squeezed it a little bit. There wasn't no feelings, but I could see her 2 middle fingers was a little longer than average, than what would be on the average woman. Now, like I say, I don't know if it was female or male or what it was, but it appeared to be female because, you know, a male can kind of sense a female and a female can sense a male. And I just sensed that it was female. And she grabbed me by the chin then with one hand, and she pushed my chin down. And that's when she took her other hand and run her fingers down my throat. And that little deal that hangs down in back of my throat, she kind of curved them and tried to come up behind it into my nasal cavities. And that's when I started choking and bleeding. Well, when I started choking down, she automatically pulled her hand out and telepathically said, "We're not going to harm you." Now, it always got to me where it was if she was talking about the big robotic looking creature, or maybe there was more somewhere hid out into another room or something. And she said in like a redneck woman's voice, kind of soothing, you know, that we're not going to harm you. And it sounded like a woman, and it was plural. And I just took it for granted it was more than one in there without seeing any of them.
Right, because she said we're.
Right. So I'm thinking at this time they must have studied the culture here and all, and related themselves to this culture where they wouldn't, you wouldn't be so afraid about all this. But she said that, and then she made a mumbling noise when I started panicking a little bit, kind of like an alligator during mating season. You can hear them for miles during the spring when they mating and all. And she did it with her throat. And this robotic looking creature I was talking about popped up like a jack in the box and just come alive. And he come over and grabbed me by the arm again, and I felt another injection at this time. Well, that kind of settled me down. Well, let me kind of back up a little bit. When I first got in and I was laying on this table, there's something about the size of a deck of cards came out of the ceiling.
Okay.
Well, it got down about a foot or a foot and a half from my forehead and started revolving around. And as it went around, it would click. And I'm figuring that was some kind of x-ray machine or MRI or something that they was doing right then, checking for something. And then it went back up, and that's when she came out, you know, and grabbed me by the chin. Well, I'm to the stage now where I started bleeding and gagging and couldn't breathe. And she summons this robotic looking creature to come back over and inject me again with whatever they had injected me with the first time. And he just lifted me back up, carried me out, set me back down on the riverbank in the same spot I was, except with my hands outreached over the river. Well, by this time, I heard Charlie saying, Calvin, you okay, son?" And I thought, well, no, I'm not okay, you know. I just got another physical here, or whatever I got.
So how much older was Charles and you?
Charles was 42 and I was 18 at this time.
Okay.
This was October the 11th, and I turned 19 November the 2nd.
Okay.
So, anyhow, I said, "Charlie," he said, "well, we need to tell somebody." I said, "Tell somebody what? Nothing happened to us. I'm not going to talk about this. I don't want nobody to know. I just got this job here. I'm supposed to get married November the 9th, which this was October the 11th. And I'm not going to go back home and have to explain all this to my wife, my future wife, my in-laws, my family, my friends." I said, "I'm just not going to talk about it no more." So he says, well, we need to tell somebody. I said, you heard me, Charlie. That's it. I'm not talking about this no more. So anyhow, we sat out there and we talked just a few minutes and got up and we made our way to the car. Well, when we got to the car, I noticed the windows on the passenger side of the car. And I had just bought this car. It was 1973 Rambler Hornet. And, you know, it didn't have many miles on it. And the windows was cracked and still in place. Well, when he opened the door, they shattered and just fell down. And I got into the car, and I noticed the car wouldn't crank then, and it's never done that. It was real hard to crank, but eventually it did get kicked off. So when we got the car cranked, we left, and we started, I assumed we was going toward his house, and that's the way that I went. And there was a little convenience store over there. Now back in the 70s, there weren't no cell phones that you could afford. Wasn't no social media, computers or anything. He said, pull over here. I need to use the phone. Well, I thought he was going to call his wife. That's when Charlie called Keesler Air Force Base. And he told them that we had been abducted by aliens or something. Well, I didn't really hear the conversation because I was in the car and he was outside. So he come back to the car and he said, do you have another dime? I said, no, look under the seat. You can probably find one because that change falls out of our pockets all the time. Well, he went back to the phone. He said, Keesler told me to call the local sheriff department, which is Jackson County Sheriff Department. So he went back to the phone and called the Jackson County Sheriff Department. They automatically thought we was drinking and messed up, so they told us, stay right there where you are, don't move, and we'll be there in a minute. And true to the word, they showed up just a few minutes. Well, the first thing they did was walk up to my side of the car, want to see my driver's license and all, because I was the one driving. And they asked me to step out. He said, would you step out of the car, please? I said, yes, sir. Well, they just kind of looked in it. They didn't search it or nothing, but they just looked in. He said, now what I need you to do, he had a little flashlight, and he said, follow this flashlight with your eyes. So I followed it with my eyes. He said, now I need you to stand on one leg, bend your head back, close your eyes, touch your nose, jump up and down and count from 100 backwards, like 199, 98, 97. Do that backwards. And I said, hell, man, I can't do that if I'm sober, much less if I've been drinking, so I don't know what's wrong with you. He said, well, I need you to do that. So I did it. He said, well, you seem to be all right. Follow us to the sheriff department. I said, yes, sir. Well, the sheriff department was just across the bridge and about a block down. So we got in the car and followed them to the sheriff department. We got out, went in. The first thing they did was give me a blood alcohol test to see if I'd been drinking. And that concluded that I hadn't drank nothing that night. And they took Charlie into one room and took me into another room. They started interrogating us separate. So they was asking me what I had seen. I said, man, I didn't see nothing. That other guy, you know, he must be the crazy one. He's seeing stuff. I didn't see a thing. Well, where I messed up, they put us into a room together. When we got into this room, they had a tape recorder here. Well,
but they did like tape it under the table or something like that?
Well, yeah, and we didn't know it was in there. So Charlie and I started talking back between ourselves. And I forget what all we said, but you know, we was talking about the abduction and things like that. Well, in a few minutes they walked in, or the sheriff had got there, which was Fred Diamond at the time. And he asked us to step out for a minute. And he got the tape recorder and he listened to it. And he come back in and said, why don't y'all go home and I need to see y'all tomorrow. I said, all right. At this time, I still didn't know he had the tape. And, but I could tell he was convinced that something had happened.
Right.
Where he, you know, he shouldn't have been before. So we got in the car, we left, we drove home. Well, the first thing I did before I left was to tell him, I said, look, Sheriff, I'm concerned about some kind of bacterial infection or something that we could spread to other people, maybe radiation or something. He said, y'all go home and rest, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. So we went on home. When I got home, I was so worried about this, I took all my clothes off, and there was blood on them. Put them in a paper bag along with my shoes. Got in the shower, and there was a gallon of bleach, and I poured that bleach over my head, thinking that if there's anything on me, it would kill it. And then I showered off and changed clothes, and I took that little bag out to the dumpster and throwed it. And they had paper bags in, you know, it wasn't plastic.
The brown paper bags.
Right.
Yeah.
So I took that out and threw it in the dumpster. Well, went back and was going to go to bed and go to sleep, but I couldn't sleep that night.
Yeah, who could?
Yeah. I was concerned and trying to figure out what had happened, exactly why it happened, and who it was. Because at the time, I had no idea about UFOs or aliens.
Did you think it was some kind of a joke? Like somebody was playing a trick on you or something like that?
I did.
That occur?
The shipyard used to build experimental stuff for the Navy and the government.
Okay.
And I was thinking, well, two old rednecks got in there drinking, gonna have some fun. And they come up there and picked us up and gonna scare the heck out of us. And they did scare us.
Right. Yeah. But
that wasn't it. Later on investigations, you know, through the sheriff department and all, they ruled all that out. So we got up the next morning and we went on to work. Well, when we got to work, I didn't know how many cars were supposed to be there, but I noticed the parking lot was full of cars. And I didn't know it was a reporter, so we clocked in, and about 5 minutes after we got there, they called our names out on the intercom to come to the shipyard office. So we went to the office at the shipyard, and the owner of the shipyard said, look, we cannot conduct business. Our phone is ringing off the hooks. I don't know what happened to y'all, but y'all need to do a press release and get this out, because we can't even answer the phones here because of the reporters. Y'all can't go back to work on the yard because people's going to be wanting to talk to you about it. And to make another story, I got hired, fired, and a physical all in the same day because the press wouldn't leave us alone. Well, it wasn't just a few minutes. He said, I have an attorney that works for the shipyard named Joe Flamingo. And he called him and he came down and he asked us what happened. Well, I still didn't say nothing. I let Charlie be the mouthpiece and talk because I figured Charlie was the one that broke the news.
Right.
And I was really mad and upset with him. So Charlie gave him a press release. And then the sheriff showed up himself and said, look, I thought about what you were saying. Y'all need to go to the Singing River Hospital to the emergency room. And I'm going to carry y'all over there and let them give you a physical. So they did. They carried us to the Singing River Hospital. And Dr. Bosco is the one that did give us the exam and did the blood work and did all this. And he just said, y'all okay to go. I don't believe there's nothing that could be spread or anything like that. So by this time, the sheriff had called Keesler Air Force Base, or they had called him wanting to come in for a radiation check. So he put us in the patrol car, and we drove to, he drove to Keesler, which is about 30 miles, or 30 minutes, might as well say, from where we were. When we got there, we didn't even slow down at the gates. They escorted us straight on back to an area where there was a warehouse.
Okay.
And there was about 6 or 7 people that has hazmat suits on. and they was standing out waiting on us. So they stepped to the car, told everybody else to step back out of the way, took us up and examined us for radiation. Well, when they done this, one of them said, all clear. They pulled their hazmat suits off, and he said, they're wanting to see y'all in the conference room. It's straight down this hall. Well, we walked down the hall to the conference room, and we got there. It was all kind of military brass. It was the mayors of most of the coastal cities, the police chiefs, a few policemen, and a few other people. I don't know who they were. And they was wanting us to tell them what happened. Well, again, I wouldn't too much tell them anything, although in the minutes of that meeting, I did tell them a little bit. But I felt scared not to by then, because we'd been through so much and they was getting so heavy on this interrogation thing. And I still wanted to stay with my story. Nothing happened, you know. So they got through interrogating us. They said, y'all can go. They was real polite and nice and just asked us a few questions. So we went back out and got in a car with the sheriff. He said, look, there's somebody that wants to see y'all when you get back to the yard. I want y'all to see them before you go anywhere else. And it was Dr. J. Allen Hynek over Project Blue Book, and Dr. James Harder, which was from the University of California, had come down on their own dime to see us and talk to us and interrogate us herself. Well, Dr. Harder took Charlie to the back room and examined him first, while Dr. Hynek talked to me. And Dr. Hynek just more or less introduced himself, told us that he used to work for the government and all, and asked me what happened. Well, again, when they put the word government in there, I was afraid to not tell them or to lie about it or anything. So I told him just a little bit about it. And then when he got through with me, Dr. Hynek interrogated Charlie, and Dr. Harder gave me a physical exam, looked at the puncture marks on my arm and all that. And they got through, and he said, look, I'm going out to the site, and I want to see y'all in the morning if at all possible. I said, yes, sir. My plans was to go on home. So the next morning we got up out of bed. Hynek had went to the site, and I remember him being upset at the sheriff department for not treating it like a crime scene, not taping it off and looking for evidence. So he got there and he walked around and looked the best he can. Didn't say nothing about finding anything at all. And he left with a remark. Well, I know something has happened to these guys in his press release, and something that I forget just how he worded it, but he believed that something did happen. Well, by that time the sheriff was giving his interview to the radio, to the news, and he was also saying, and it's not like the sheriff back then, you know, he was a real hard butt. I mean, he was real firm. And he initially said, you know, I believe these guys. I believe something happened to these guys. So I went and I got my car, went and got my rest of my stuff at Charlie's house, and I drove back to Laurel, Mississippi. Well, when I got to Laurel, the media would not leave me alone. I mean, they kept hounding me. So I just more or less went into seclusion for 45 years. I didn't tell my fiance, I didn't tell my friends, I didn't tell my family nothing about what had happened. I just kept it under my hat. And up until it got time to write this first book, I still hadn't told anybody nothing. Now, if you want to be in a doghouse, you keep a secret from your wife for 45 years. Now, the way this book came about, we had a neighbor that passed away.
Okay.
We went to his wake.
Okay.
And while we was at the wake, I normally never signed my name to anything, but we did sign the register that night. Well, people started recognizing my name on the register. You know, this has been 45 years later, and I spent my whole life hiding from the media. And they noticed my name on this register, and they said, "Are you the Calvin Parker that got abducted in '73?" Well, I hated to just sit there and lie. And I said, "Yes, I am." They started asking questions. So my wife and I decided to leave out of respect for this woman and her daughter.
6 or 8 people.
They was mourning. And on the way home, she said, "Why don't you write a book?" I says, "No, I'm not no author. I don't have an education. I can't even spell my own name part of the time, much less write a damn book."
Yeah.
So she mentioned it and brought it up and kept on about it. I said, "Well, maybe if I get a ghostwriter, I might try one," which I knew I was lying. I was just trying to get her off my case about the book. Well, it just so happened the next day, the very next day, I got an email from a guy called Martin Willis, and I had talked to him in the past on a little podcast. This was years ago. And he had my contact information. He said that Philip Mantle wanted to get in touch. Now, I didn't know Philip Mantle from the UK over anybody.
Okay, that's interesting because I booked you, and then like 2 weeks later, I got this weird email from that Philip Mantle guy.
Oh,
and I was
really?
like, yeah, I'll read it to you real quick. And it freaked me out because I was like, oh God, I'm here with a guy that got abducted by aliens. What's this happening? It says right here, I got it right here. And it freaked me out because it says to undisclosed recipients. So I was like, I'm thinking something the government or something. It was just me thinking that, no disrespect. It was like, give me a little bit of information. Like over the past 2 years, this alien abduction. Gave me a bunch of notes, and it said that they were writing a movie and doing a documentary and the song and all that. So once I realized, once you sent me that song that you wanted me to play, I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So
so he asked my contact information. I told Martin, I said, "That's fine, give it to him." Well, he called, and it was actually Charlie Hickson had wrote a book. I had nothing to do with it. And he wanted to know if I had any information to ask me a few questions about it. I said, "I don't talk about stuff like this, Philip. I just don't get into it. I don't want to talk about it. And I don't have any information on the book." I said, "Every time I talk to the press or someone, they change my stories."
Yeah.
I said, "They take something as dramatic as this, and they make it even more dramatic by lying about it." And I said, "So I don't give interviews, and I don't want to." He said, "Look, I have a solution." He said, "Why don't you go on record, make this your legacy, and you put it black and white, and they can't change it." And I thought, well, that does sound pretty good. I said, "Let me think about it.
Right.
Just call me back." So what I did when I hung the phone up with him, he was supposed to call back in a week. I put no answer where his name was because I had no intentions on talking to him again.
Sure.
Well, I was down at the boat landing loading my boat up. My phone rung, and it just kept ringing back to back. So I figured something might be wrong, maybe at home or something, and I just grabbed it and answered without looking at the ID on it. And it was Philip Mantle. And I said, "Oh man, I hate to be rude and hang up on him. I'm going to hear him out." He said, "Calvin, listen to me. Have you thought about the book?" I said, "Yeah, I thought about it." I said, "Philip, I don't have an education, and as I said, everything I do gets changed." So he talked a little bit more, and he actually talked me into this book deal. And I come home and talked to my wife about it, and that's what she was wanting too, so it kind of made her happy. So the deal and agreement that we made was that you do not edit this book, not one thing in it. You don't correct a misspelled word. You don't put a period or question mark on it.
Where they're supposed to be. Right.
Right. You don't do nothing to the book. The raw book is me. That's the way that I want this. And that's the only way that I'll write a book. He said, "Well, you could probably do it in 2 or 3 years." And I agreed not to do all that. I said, 2 or 3 years? said, hell, I can read a book in a week. I know I can write it in a week. So I told my wife, I said, look, we reached a deal on the book, and I'm going to my room. Don't let nobody bother me. About once a day, send me something to eat, a glass of water or tea in there. And I started working on the book. Mm-hmm. Well, in 2 weeks, I sent him the first draft of the book. Well, he sent it back. He said, that's quite a mess. I said, well, that's just the way I am. Remember, I don't have an education in literature. I'm not an author. I'm just trying to tell a story. He said, let me give you a guideline to go by. He said, chapter 1, talk about this. Chapter 2, talk about this. Chapter 3.
Right.
And get down, toward the abduction and what happened and all that. So he gave me the guideline to go by. Well, probably in 3 or 4 days, I went by that guideline. I grouped everything up like you said. The first is to introduce myself. Then where did I meet Charlie? Then talk about the abduction. And he had it numbered down into different chapters. So I did it that way. Well, he first said we'd do the book in September. We'll release it in September of 2018. Mm. But he got the book and he looked over it, published it, and put the stuff that he wanted off into the book. And accidentally sent it to Amazon to review, and so we could set it up for September. Well, this was in July, and the Amazon accidentally released the book for one day. Well, we couldn't take it off the market.
Right.
It was such a big demand for this book.
Really?
That we couldn't take it off. It hit the bestsellers list within a week after it was on the market. So Philip just gave up everything that he was doing right then and helped, with the book, promote it and all. Well, it was shocking because I figured I would sell 10 copies and I'd have to buy them. And I just give my families and friends a copy to keep from having to tell the story. Because I still hadn't, up until this happened, I hadn't even talked to my wife about it.
Right.
Now, while I was writing the book, I did have a hypnosis in '93 from Bud Hopkins. And I sent Philip I just mentioned to him one day, I said, I got to meet Bud Hopkins in Florida one time. He tried to hypnotize me, but he couldn't. So he said, oh, I know Bud Hopkins. He's a good friend of mine. Let me see if I can get, he's dead now, but let me see if I can get a hold of that, transcripts. So it wasn't too long after that, Dr. Jacobs, which took over Bud Hopkins' work, emailed and asked permission to give Philip Mantle the transcripts of the hypnosis, which I didn't even know I'd been hypnotized.
Right.
I said, yeah, that'll be fine. He's a publisher, we're doing a book, go ahead and give it to him. So he gave it to Philip. Well, Philip transcribed this out in writing, and he sent it to me. Well, I didn't take time to read much of it. I just got in there and opened it up and looked, and I thought, man, damn, I have been hypnotized. That was shocking to me. I went out on my porch, and I sat down. I told my wife, I said, look, that nutcase did hypnotize me over there. And it's all black and white right here. And Philip sending me the tape. And I said, what I'm not going to do, I'm not going to read it. I don't want to know about it. I don't want these thoughts in my mind. But what Bud had done was put a post-hypnotic suggestion in my head that I wouldn't remember this until it was time to remember it. So I asked my wife, I said, you go read this and you remember it. And then when something comes up or I remember it, I'm going to ask you about it. And you see if it's in the transcripts of the hypnosis. So she went in there, stayed in there about 45 minutes, come back out crying. She said, I just can't read no more. I said, why? Is it that bad? She said, it's bad and I can't read no more. Don't want to read it, not going to. But she had read through, most of it. Well, what jarred my mind, Linda Moulton Howe called wanting an interview. Well, she's an investigative reporter also. Well, I accepted the interview, but she did her homework, and a lot of homework on me. She knew more about me and my past than I knew about me and my past. And she started asking questions. And through these questions, it jogged my memory, and my memory started coming back about this hypnosis stuff. And sure enough, it was like a movie projector in front of me. I started remembering it and putting dates and times and facts together with it. And I told Philip, go ahead and have it in the book, that I still wasn't going to read it. I was waiting it out. And that's what we did. Well, to make a long story short, the book hit bestsellers list. I started getting calls. I started getting interviewed. News media started to interview me. Fox News called. They wanted me on Water's World. I went on that. Several news agents did. All the local news just swarmed the house here. I didn't realize when I did this book how hungry people were to hear this story. Well, then Rebecca Davis, from Main Street, Pascagoula, set up a book signing for Pascagoula. And she asked if I'd come on the anniversary, that October the 11th. Just, we released the book in July. So that following October the 11th, well, we agreed to go to that. I didn't think anybody would be there. So I was just going to go sit down and sign a few books for her. She ordered some books, tell a little story. We ended up being there for hours. It was lines stretched out down the street. It didn't look like any end to them. And hearing no country redneck up there, sitting here signing books and telling his story. And everybody was just so interested in it. And out of the story came a lot more. That's where the second book came from, which to me is a lot better than the first.
Okay.
The first book, I didn't want to do myself. That just happened. The second book, I wanted to be involved in, I wanted to do, because I knew the people in this book, the witnesses that come forward and all, and I had been talking to it. I've been going to conventions and talking on the news media. So I felt a little more comfortable talking about it now than what I did then. Like I say, the first book, as far as me wanting to do it, I really didn't want to do it. But the second book I wanted to get into, and I've read the second book 2 or 3 times myself, just because it intrigued me, everything that happened after that.
Right. Now, I haven't read either book. Let me tell you how I came upon you.
Okay.
So a couple years ago, I was in the library down where I'm at, and they had this book, because I'm fascinated with like aliens and the ghosts and all. I'm just fascinated. And so I don't remember the title of the book, but it had your story and Charles's story in there, that you guys were abducted, and I was like, that's interesting. Never heard of it before. And then you were on a couple of TV shows, like, don't really know the name, like maybe like Unsolved Mysteries or some it was one of those weird things.
The Channel.
Travel Channel, yes.
Right.
It was one of those, and I was like,
they did a great job on there.
Fantastic job. And I was like, wow, maybe I can get this guy. And then that's how this came about. I was very interested, did my research of what I could, and got a hold of you, and that's how we did it. So that's how I know who you are.
Yeah. Just last night I had, they got that Haunted Channel.
Yes.
Well, they got in touch with me and asked me if I'd come on that. So I'm still in question about that. I don't know if I want to go or not. So I sent them back an email and filled out their little application thing that you have to fill out. So they screen it and see about it, and I'll see about it when time gets here.
Now, do you ever, even though you wrote 2 books, you're talking to me right now, do you ever get tired of telling the story? Or is it just like, it's part of your life, so why can't you not tell it?
Well, used to, I didn't want to tell it. You go 40, like I say, you go 45 years.
Right.
and not talk about this, and all your friends and your family knows about it, your wife knows about it, and you not tell her, you know, it was like a relief when it come down. So yeah, it relieved 45 years off my life. It's helped my marriage because I don't have to keep this secret from her anymore. We actually talk about this sometime. She goes to the conventions with me. You know, they'll give me a little speaking fee and buy my plane ticket. We'll take that and buy her plane ticket. And we actually have fun together. We do things together and all. So yeah, it's down to where I enjoy talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And because this is the first relief I've had
right
this last year. You know, this just been a year since the first book came out. So
is the second book out now?
The second book's out. It came out October this year.
Oh, okay. So this month.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's out this month through Amazon.
Okay.
And it's Pascagoula, the story continues.
Right.
New witnesses, new evidence.
Right.
So, like I say, we've met a lot of interesting people. We actually went down, went to Arizona at UFO Congress, and we was there for a week. And during this week, we met Dr. Alan Hynek's son, Paul Hynek, and he's such a pleasure to be around. Got to be around George Knapp. I've known George for years, and
George Knapp was one of those that was involved in the can't remember the name. It was
Bob Lazar.
Bob Lazar. That's it. Thank you. On Netflix. Have you seen that?
No, I hadn't watched it.
But you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, Bob Lazar. That's right.
So, yeah, I know George Knapp well. He's a personal friend. I got to meet him face to face instead of talking to him on the media. And since then, I've done a couple of interviews with him on Midnight in the Desert or whatever shows he's on. Martin Willis was there, and the same day that I got to meet Paul Hynek, which I just sent Paul a text a while ago. This book right here is Paul Hynek's. I just autographing it to him and go mail it to him. But he is so funny, and he remembered back when he was just a kid. Dr. Alan Hynek gave me his phone number and said if I ever need anything, I wanted just to call him. Well, I called, and his dad was gone. Well, he was out playing soccer, and he run in to answer the phone, and he had a big chalkboard, and he was trying to write the message on the board, and he was trying to spell Pascagoula. Of course, Pascagoula, I guess, is a French name or something, like gaucher, you know.
Yeah.
The way you say them and the way you spell them is two different ways.
Things, yeah.
So I was trying to tell him how, and hell, I couldn't spell Pascagoula.
Yeah.
And I finally just tell him Calvin Parker called, I can spell that. So he wrote it down on the chalkboard, and we was talking about him sitting there struggling, trying to write all this information down. Another person I got to know at this conference, we had a booth set up, and I was autographing a few books and signing them. And Kathleen Martin had a booth right by us, which she's a hypnotist that came down in just before this book and interviewed. The transcripts of the new hypnotized are in the new book.
Okay.
So Kathleen came down. Now, she's trained in forensic science. She's also a trained hypnotist and registered to do that. And she flew down here and hypnotized me in a 3-hour session. And we got a lot of new information out of that. Now, what being hypnotized does, it don't really put anything in your head or take anything away, but it helps sharpen the details of what did happen. And that has always surprised me. I know the first time I told the guy that hypnotized me, I said, look, see, I was a little country boy. I'd never been hypnotized. I said, but I watched these floor shows in Las Vegas, and I seen them do stupid things when they ask them. Now, I don't know how true that is, but if you try to get me to do something stupid, this friend of mine is going to be in a room with us, He's going to take my ball bat and he's going to beat your brains out and he's going to give me the ball bat back and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what I told him. And all that's in the first book and all. So, I can be hypnotized. A lot of people can't. A lot of people can. And it's something that you really want to have to be. Now, we took polygraph tests, voice stress tests, every truth test known to man, except for CIA giving us sodium pentothal or something. But we've been hypnotized. We've been interrogated by some of the best people that interrogate. Never had no man in black, not that I know of. But Paul Hynek, which was John Howland Hynek's son, said the man in black do exist in every way. So, we've been through the ringer with this. And now we got the books out. My plan is to, if my health holds up, we working on our houseboat now. When it's ready, we're going to get it and take time every now and then, go off grid, just to get away from all this.
Yep.
And we completely self-retain, water, sewers, electricity, and all that. So we could go out and stay a few days and not have to worry about nothing and come back just to
get
be
away from it and just come back, yeah.
Because now, the way that this is, I never know who's going to show up on our doorsteps, And most of them don't have an invitation. Somebody be knocking on your door. For instance, I had one man knocking on the door. Of course, I've invited them in, and he came in. He said, "Am I going to hell?" I said, "Man, I don't know. I'm not Jesus. I don't judge you. I don't know what you've done or who you even are." So he wanted to talk. Him and his wife come in. It was hot out there. So one had invited them all in. We sat there and talked a few minutes. He told me who he was. And they all know that I'm a Christian. My beliefs hadn't been stumbled in that way.
Right.
We're recently working on a screenplay for a movie.
Right.
And it's due to come out soon.
So how did that come about? That's what I was going to ask you about.
Back when I first did the book, I was contacted by a seller. And when I say a seller, somebody that takes this, does a screenplay.
Okay.
And he sells the movie rights in.
Okay.
So we've done several additions to one as of, before this one comes out. And they hadn't been exactly like the book was. And I'm not going to accept anything myself except for the facts.
Yeah.
I don't want it to end up like Travis Walton's movie, Fire in the Sky. I talked to Travis when we was in Arizona, and he was telling me how all that came about and all. So, I want to be sure that it's as factual as what we can get it.
Yeah.
Because why take something this big and have to lie about it and make it a Harry Potter movie or something?
Right. It's kind of like that Walk the Line with Johnny Cash. Like,
right.
That is like 95% like fake. And it's just
right.
like, there's only 5% that's real. And you just like, once you learn it, you're like, they're lying to us. But again, it's Hollywood. So they,
right.
They have to get your attention. But why wouldn't this get your attention?
Yeah, why wouldn't it?
That's what I'm saying.
The story's there. It's black and white in the book.
Mm-hmm.
All a person has to do is take the screenplay and write it off the book. If nothing else, start off in Katrina, work your way back, or start off in the sheriff department when they was interviewing us.
Yeah.
Showing that we took a field sobriety test and a blood alcohol test, show we wasn't drinking, and then work from there, show Dr. Hynek coming in. It's just a lot of ways to go about it, which I hadn't agreed with any of them that I've seen so far.
So, last question here. There's a song by Johnny Cobb, which is like a big songwriter guy, big singer-songwriter guy, and Jerry McCoy. I'm not familiar with that name, but I'm pretty sure since he's associated with Johnny Cobb, he's a pretty big deal.
He's a great guitarist.
You have they got a song about your story called Blackwater Blue Moon.
Right.
So, did they come to you, or did somebody reach out again, like the book and the movie?
No, they actually came to us about the song and
Okay.
wanted to do a song. And he is a great guy. He was real interested in this stuff like that. So he got the details from my publisher, Philip Manham. And they worked on a video and a song together. And then they presented it to me. And I think it's great. I think it's a good song. My wife loves it. I love it. And, you know, he did that because he just wanted to be a friend and to show his support in this. He's not asking for nothing out of it or anything. So, you know, we've become friends since then, and he's a great guy. And if there's ever a movie, I would love to have this song in the movie.
Right. Because that'd be a perfect fit. Because it's not just like you're not picking one out of a hat. You're actually one that was written for you by about your story.
You're not just picking your own song. And where that came from, Karen Nelson with the Sun Herald newspaper, she interviewed Glenn Ryder, which was one of the deputies that come out.
Okay.
And he was you could pull that up in online, and he was sitting there telling about when he come out to investigate us, and he was sitting in his chair and he said, you know, when there's black water and a full moon, there's strange things happen here on the coast. And that just clicked for some reason, made a big impression on me, and it's true. And we fish on a regular basis. Me and my wife still fish. We hadn't done much of it this last year because we've been traveling. But this year we're not going to travel so much. But where we are going to travel is going to be places that we actually want to go and travel to. And, you know, I've already started getting invitations to conferences. But I'm not going to be like a lot of these people make career going to these conferences.
Yeah.
These books, I help promote them and sell them the best that I can. If there's a movie, I'll do that. But other than that, I want my private life back. I want to be back to where I was.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Ben, I appreciate it. If you get a third book out, if you decide to write one, we'll get you back on, you promote that.
Good deal.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Hodgepodge Productions.